Alright guys, so this is going to be an in-depth review and walk around of my 2022 PJ B5 18-foot long buggy hauler trailer that I purchased last year. I know I've been due for a walk around video of this thing, and I've had it just about a year, so I guess it's better late than never. But to give you guys a little bit of background here, if you follow my channel the last couple of years, you know that for quite a while I was running a 6.5 foot wide by 12 foot long Zook's welding single axle utility trailer, or landscape trailer I guess you could call it. And I bought that back in the fall of 2017 when I was, still living at home in New Jersey. Was pretty actively involved in my lawn care business, and things were going really good. And for the first couple of years of my lawn care business, I had gotten by just borrowing trailers from people, hauling my lawn equipment in the back of my truck, or even driving the mowers down the road to get where I needed to go to mow some of these lawns. And that worked for a while, but if you're trying to expand, you got to invest in better equipment. And I figured eventually I was due for an upgrade, so I decided to bite the bullet and buy my own trailer. And at the time, I wanted to get something that was a little bit sturdier than your typical run-in-the-mill, Lowe's or Tractor Supply or Home Depot utility trailer. So I ended up buying a Zook's welding trailer from a local Mennonite dealership in South Jersey there, not far from home. And the thing I liked about the Zook's trailer was it had a 2-inch by 2-inch square tube top rail all the way around, and it also had a heavy-duty Dexter axle under it. And it had a pretty sturdy frame for what it was. It had 3 cross members, and then it had the solid cross member going across or down the length of the tongue, which, as far as I know, on a trailer that size is pretty uncommon. And that trailer served me really well for the 4 years that I had it, with the lawn care business, and then running all over New Jersey and Pennsylvania going to shows. I definitely got my money's worth out of it, and it paid for itself pretty quickly, I have to say. But I found myself at the point where I was really asking too much of it, loading it up too heavy. Sometimes a couple different times I tried hauling 4 garden tractors on it, and it got to be a little too much for it, especially being pulled behind my old F-150, my old half-ton pickup truck that I used to have. It was just asking a lot of it, and I had the weight pretty much maxed out on that single axle. So as time went on, as I, moved away from home, I moved out here to Pennsylvania. Obviously, I stopped doing my lawn care since I'm living out in a new place now. And as my hobbies have expanded to include collecting larger and larger tractors and equipment, primarily, antique farm tractors, I knew that I was going to have to upgrade to a trailer that was suitable for hauling antique tractors as well as my garden tractor collection. So I tried to find something that was a happy medium, I should say. I wanted to replace my original landscape trailer with a trailer that was going to be, small enough that it wouldn't be too obnoxiously big and heavy if I just wanted to haul a couple garden tractors around, or even just one garden tractor around. But I also wanted something that was substantial enough to safely haul the weight of one farm tractor at least, as my collection expands. And I had to do a lot of research leading up to the purchase of this trailer that you see here. It took several months of reading online, calling up different dealerships, doing my research on different trailer brands, and watching a lot of YouTube videos, and just asking around for a lot of people's opinions and testimonials before I decided on this trailer here. Now, one thing I want to mention is that I live out here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which is home to several major trailer manufacturers, including Peckway, Belmont, EB, Boxlight, and Pine Hill, among others. I should say that I evaluated all of the options that those manufacturers offered as well, but I still ended up ultimately buying a PJ when it was all said and done. I actually kept an Excel spreadsheet running on my computer where I managed and compared the specs of about 15 different trailers over the course of several months. It was a lot of phone calls and just a lot of research before I finally arrived at this particular make and model of trailer. It took, I'd say, probably 3 or 4 months of research before I really decided what trailer I wanted to get. And keep in mind, this was right in the middle of COVID, so supply shortages were imminent and still are to this day. A lot of manufacturers were having trouble getting the materials to build some of the trailers that I was looking for, or they had just discontinued them, discontinued production entirely. So it really made for a challenge. So the first bit of criteria that I wanted to follow for the new trailer purchase was that it had to have at least a 10,000 pound gross weight rating, just to be on the safe side, because you know your typical antique farm tractor could weigh anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 pounds. So I just wanted to be on the safe side. So whatever trailer I was going to buy was going to have heavy axles under it, and at least 2 axles, because a single axle trailer hauling that kind of weight is basically a death sentence, and it's a DOT field day as well. The second bit of criteria that I needed to, or that I was adhering to, was that it had to have an extra wide deck. Now, in the United States, DOT maximum allowable width without being considered a wide load is 102 inches, which is just about 8.5 feet wide. And your typical, you know, your typical equipment and utility trailers are going to be anywhere from 6 to 7 foot wide. So I wanted to go a little bit wider beyond the wood deck. And the reason for that was because in southern New Jersey, where I'm originally from, and where some of the tractors in my collection were originally from, that's vegetable country, and a lot of the tractors in that area were sold as vegetable specials, which means that they have very long axles for wide row spacing, you know, row crop spacing. So as a result, a lot of the tractors that were sold new in that area are very wide. They have wide axles, wide spacing, and cannot easily be hauled on your typical, you know, 6 or 7 foot wide trailer. So keeping that in mind, I wanted to order a trailer with a wider deck. And oddly enough, the first tractor that I hauled with this, the very first load that I hauled with this trailer once I got it, was a John Deere 60 with the extra long axles, and the wheels on that one were spaced out as wide as they would go. So those back wheels were sitting up on top of the fenders. So that gives you any indication. Yeah, that's just, I had to plan accordingly, because that tractor would not have fit on a typical equipment trailer. My third criteria for purchasing a new trailer was that I had to have a heavy-duty single-piece tailgate. In the past, I had borrowed a couple different trailers from people that did not have a tailgate at all. They just had the individual ramps that you pull out, you know, slide out of the bottom. I mean, those work, but for somebody like me who hauls a lot of smaller equipment around, especially garden tractors, it can be kind of time consuming, and it's just a bit of a pain. So I wanted something with a single piece fold down tailgate that was heavy enough to you know, withstand the weight of a farm tractor as well. There were only a handful of trailer manufacturers out there that not only offer a single piece tailgate, but a heavy duty single piece tailgate. The Zook's trailer that I had before was it was a single piece, but it had just one big piece of mesh welded across the whole thing, so it really couldn't take a whole lot of weight. For what I was looking to do, I needed something that, in addition to the mesh, would have had some kind of reinforcement like C-channel steel or angle iron or square tube like you see here. So that was the next, and definitely one of the more important things I had to take into consideration when I was trailer shopping. So when factoring in the criteria that I mentioned before, as well as the lead times, given a lot of the equipment shortages and supply shortages from COVID, as well as price, obviously price had to be a big factor. I ended up ultimately deciding on a PJ trailer that you can see here, and as a matter of fact, I ended up buying it from the same dealership down in New Jersey that I bought my first trailer from. Those guys worked with me the first time. They really helped me out. They knew what they were talking about, and always took care of me when I had an issue with that old trailer. So they were willing to build me a trailer the way I wanted, and for price, they pushed me towards price and quality, I should say. They pushed me towards a PJ, and I've heard a lot of good about PJ. I mean, they've had their share of issues as well, but I did a lot of careful research before I decided, you know, before I arrived at that decision. So I ordered this trailer in May of 2021, right, you know, when the supply shortages were at large, and we were seeing long lead times for pretty much any piece of equipment you could think of, whether it be trailers or cars or trucks or farm equipment. We're still seeing a lot of that right now in 2022, but I don't think the lead times are quite as bad as they were, you know, this time last year. Told me it was going to be about a 16-week lead time, and sure enough, 16 weeks later, she finally came in. Now, during that time, I was still, you know, getting some use out of my old single axle trailer, but I took it to a show out in York County, Pennsylvania, you know, hauling a garden tractor with me, and on the way back, I stopped at a gas station to fill up, and I had a guy walk over to me and ask if I would sell my trailer and how much. And he said that he could not get a trailer in that size, no matter where he went, nobody could price him out one because they just couldn't get him in. So the supply was pretty short and the demand was pretty high. So he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and the next day he came down to the house here. I had a bill of sale made up, I had him sign it, and he took it home with him. So that made for a quick and easy sale. And about 3 weeks later was when this trailer had finally come in. I got the call that it was ready to go, and I went down to New Jersey and picked it up. And that was, at that time, I had still had my old F-150. I hadn't bought my 7.3 F-250 yet, but I happened to be down in New Jersey with my red F-150 there, so I actually pulled the trailer home with that truck, which is one of the only times this truck has ever pulled the trailer, and I do not like using it for that. But you know, a heavy trailer like that isn't so bad behind a half-ton truck when it's empty. So like I said, this model is a B5, and the reason they call it B5 is because it's considered a buggy hauler. You know, like for the guys who have their dune buggies with the really wide stance, they need an extra wide deck to carry them. It's designed for that purpose, but over the years, a lot of guys have adapted them to haul, you know, their farm tractors and other pieces of equipment. So that's where the B in the model number comes from. The 5 in the model number comes from the fact that it uses 5-inch channel steel for the majority of its construction. The frame is all 5-inch channel, and they also offer this model with 6-inch channel, which, as you can imagine, would be called the B6. But from a price point, I felt like it was a little more than I needed. If I was hauling anything higher than 10,000 pounds gross weight with the trailer, I'd have to go with something a little bit heavier, more substantial, obviously. But for what I'm looking to do, the 5-inch channel was just fine. Now, with the PJ trailers, a lot of guys complain, and you can see this in, you know, endless YouTube videos. A lot of guys complain about the quality of the powder coat finish, which is actually one of the things I like about the PJ trailers, is the option of a powder coat finish. But the problem that a lot of guys have is that they do not order the powder coat with a primer coat underneath. A lot of guys will just opt for the powder coat itself because they don't want to have to pay the extra price for the primer. And then they complain when the powder coat starts to peel after a year or two. I mean, you can make a powder coat job look really well, but just like paint, I've said this in the past too, but powder coat is just like paint in that if it's not prepped correctly, it's not going to last. So, like I said, you hear, you know, reading a lot of reviews and watching a lot of YouTube videos, you hear people complain about the quality of the powder coat on their PJ trailers. Like I said, what it comes down to is you have to get it prepped correctly. PJ does offer the option of an acid wash and primer for these, so I made sure to go that route. I had I ordered it with the acid wash, where the acid wash is done to clean all of the stamping dyes and, you know, oil and dirt off of the steel before it is powder coated. I wanted to keep things simple, so I just ordered the gloss black powder coat, and I think it looks pretty sharp. I also ordered this trailer with the 5,200 pound rated axles. The B5 comes with the option of 3,500 pound or 5,200 pound axles, depending on, you know, what gross weight rating you're going after. For me, it had to be a 10,000 pound gross weight rating, so obviously I ordered the heavier axles. And these axles have the Easy Lube, which has the grease fittings right on the ends there. You just pop the rubber cap off, and there's your grease fitting. The axles are also leaf sprung. There's individual leaf springs on each wheel, as you can see, and each wheel has its own, you know, electric brake. And another nice thing that I like about the PJ trailers is they give you a couple different options for tires depending on your axle rating. So originally, if I remember correctly, the 5,200 pound axles would have come with 205/75 R15 tires, tubeless tires. I opted for the slightly heavier duty 225/75 R15s, just so they could, you know, withstand the extra weight in case I ended up having to haul anything heavier than originally planned for. The way I see it, it's better to go, you know, better to have something a little more substantial than what you need. Better to have the heavier tires and not need them than to need them and not have them. Because with my old trailer, I'd learned that lesson pretty quick when I started loading it down heavier and heavier. Those cheap little tires on that single axle were not too happy with me by the time I sold the trailer, but I never had a blowout, so I guess I really can't complain that much. This trailer has a pressure-treated pine wood deck, which is 7 foot wide, and then it has the diamond plate on the outer ends, which expands it to 8.5 foot wide. And then the diamond plate also, or I guess I should say the extension also comes with an outer rub rail with individual stake pockets and tie downs. So as if that wasn't enough tie down options, I also opted to add 5 individual welded D-rings to each side, just so I have more spaces to tie down. Some of the trailers that we have where I work, the dealership where I work, do not have D-rings inside the axles here, so it makes things a little bit more difficult sometimes when you're trying to tie something down. So I made sure to order the extra D-rings as well. And if you notice, the deck looks pretty aged, even though the trailer is only about a year old. And the reason for that is because not long after I had purchased it, my girlfriend and I spent an evening coating the wood planks with used engine oil, just to help preserve it a little bit. If you don't take care of that right away, these decks like to rot out, fairly quick. I mean, wood is obviously meant to last, but I'm trying to do what I can to preserve the wooden deck. So that's a good habit to get into, especially with these trailers, because obviously, especially in this day and age, wood or lumber are not cheap by any means. So I try to protect my investment. So I made sure to jump on that when the trailer was still new. I coated the top side, and I actually laid underneath and coated the bottom side as well. So that's a good habit to get into. That's something I'll probably do every year. In fact, it's actually looking like it may be due again here pretty soon. So if you have a trailer with a wooden deck like this, I highly recommend taking that extra step to help preserve the lumber. It'll just last a lot longer that way, and we all know how expensive lumber is in this day and age, among other materials. This trailer also comes equipped all the way around with LED lights, which come with a lifetime warranty, and every LED light is installed with a rubber grommet around it to act kind of like a shock absorber in case you accidentally back into something. And it protects the light against damage. And like I said, they do come with a lifetime warranty. Another pretty neat defining feature of these PJ trailers are that they come standard with the Demco Easy Latch for the hitch ball. It's set up for a 2 5/16 inch hitch ball, and the neat thing about this is it's literally just a latch. There's no need to lock it in with a pin. All you got to do is when you're hooking up the trailer, pull this up, crank your jack down, and then once the ball is seated, flip the latch down. That's all there is to it. So that's a nice little standard feature on these PJs. And the hitch itself, the ball hitch is also adjustable. You have 4 different holes here, depending on the height of your hitch in your truck. So over the course of the last year that I've had this trailer, it has come in very handy for hauling multiple garden tractors at a time. I've had about 4 or 5 garden tractors on this trailer at once. And the nice thing about having the extra wide 102-inch wide deck is that you can actually fit 2 garden tractors side by side pretty comfortably with mower decks, with smaller mower decks under them, like a 38 or 42-inch deck, as well as wheel weights. Once you get into like the 48, 54, 60-inch decks, obviously those are going to take up the majority of the width. But I'd say anything under like 42-inch, anything under a 42-inch mower deck, you can fit 2 tractors side by side pretty comfortably. And I've gone on some long trips with this trailer, hauling tractors side by side in the front and the back, and even sideways. I've hauled garden tractors. I've had big tractors up front, and then garden tractor turned sideways on the back, and they all fit very snug. So that extra wide deck is certainly something that I'm thankful for. Now, of course, no trailer is going to be without flaws. There are all different kinds of styles out there. There are different manufacturers, but there are a couple things about this trailer that I'm not a fan of. I'll just go over those now. So the first thing, if you didn't notice before, is the decal placement. In my opinion, for what these trailers are worth and for the good reputation that PJ has, the placement of these reflective decals is just, it's piss poor quality control. I mean, look at that. They couldn't even center the PJ logo, let alone the reflective tape. So I don't know if that was just a result of them, rushing to try and get these things out at the factory as soon as they could. I understand that's been a common issue here lately, the last couple of years, is, these manufacturers are trying as hard as they can to get stuff cranked out and down the assembly line. But I mean, this is piss poor quality. I'm going to leave it be. I'm not going to try and fix it. It doesn't really bother me that much, but it is kind of a pet peeve of mine, and I've heard of other PJ trailers that have come out of the factory with similar defects like that. They could have tried a little bit harder, spent a couple extra minutes trying to line up the decals just right, and you can see some of them are actually starting to peel off. So that's something PJ ought to work on just using a better quality adhesive. So that's one complaint I have about this trailer, but it doesn't affect the functionality of the trailer by any means. You can see down the other side of the tongue, same deal. The decal placement is not very good at all. But like I said, I'm just going to leave it be. It's not the end of the world. I'm also not very happy with the placement of some of the front equipment here on the tongue. To start with the jack, I feel that the jack stand should have been mounted on the back side of this piece of C-channel here. They could have just welded the C-channel in the other way and then bolted the jack up here. It's not, it's not a deal breaker by any means, but sometimes I worry that if I'm on an incline or something like that and I have to drop my tailgate down on the truck, that it's going to interfere with the jack. And it has come pretty close, especially in the yard that I have here. It's a gradual slope down to the back, so sometimes when I go to put my tailgate down, if I'm loading something up and I have the trailer hooked up, the tailgate will actually hit or come very close to hitting the jack. So if they had they do themselves a big favor if they would have just welded this piece of C-channel in the other way and bolted the jack to the back side. I do understand why they mounted the jack in the front there, though. That is to leave space in between the tongue rails there for a tongue mounted toolbox, which is another PJ option. It sits down, recessed inside of those tongue frame rails there. And my plan was to eventually put one of those toolboxes on this trailer, just so I had something to haul my chains and binders and straps around with. But I was not going to purchase it with the trailer initially, just because of the added cost. It was something I was looking to add, down the road. So if you have the tongue mounted toolbox, the jack placement, it makes sense that the jack is placed further up. But if it wasn't for the fact that I do plan to put a toolbox in this thing someday, I would have preferred that the jack be mounted on the other side of that piece of C-channel there. Unfortunately, when I ordered this trailer, the salesman informed me that I could not order both the spare tire mount and the tongue mounted toolbox, so I actually opted to go without the spare tire mount. Unfortunately, the guys at the PJ factory welded the spare tire mount anyway, which is another thing that I'm not a fan of with this trailer. Now, PJ does offer the choice of a stake pocket mounted spare tire mount, and in hindsight I probably should have gone that route just so I could mount the spare tire in any of the stake pockets wherever I saw fit. Because like I said, the only other option is to weld the spare tire mount to the front of the front rail there. And personally, I think that's a horrible spot. They could have at least offset it to the left or right if they were going to weld it in place. I don't know why they would have, or why they prefer to weld them instead of bolt them in. But like I said, I was originally planning to install a tongue mounted toolbox, and they won't let you get a tongue mounted toolbox if you have the spare tire mount welded in place. So I was a little disappointed when I went to pick up the trailer and it had that welded in place, but I said, you know what, I'm just going to leave it for the time being, because in order to undo all of that, they would have had to cut the welds, they would have had to cut this all down, grind it flush, and then re-powder coat it, because I was not going to let them just spray bomb over it with a can of paint. You don't paint over top of powder coat. That just doesn't look right. So I figured, you know what, rather than go through all that trouble and, understanding what they had to go through and the delays and everything, I said, you know what, I'm not going to worry about it right now. When the time comes, I'll figure something out as far as a spare tire mount when I do go to put a toolbox in, but for right now, it's not the end of the world. So I was a little bit disappointed in that, but like I said, for now, it'll do. Because otherwise, I'd be stuck waiting another 16 weeks for a whole new trailer to come in without the spare tire mount. So you can see I have the tailgate folded down now, and like I mentioned before, I am a huge proponent of the fact that I was able to order this trailer with a heavy-duty one-piece tailgate, but I do have one complaint about this tailgate, and it is that there is no reinforcement in the center of the tailgate itself where the mesh is. You can see they have these two basically small ramp-like structures that are welded to either end of the tailgate, and that's all fine and dandy until you go to load a narrow front tractor, which was the very first thing that I hauled with this trailer, because the only thing you have in the middle there to support the weight is mesh, and mesh does not handle the weight of a 6,000-pound tractor very well. So needless to say, the very first time I loaded this trailer, I loaded up that John Deere 60 parts tractor that I have, which has a single front wheel, and that tractor was not running, so we had to load it with a crane, and there was no way to really steer it at that point. So the center, the single front wheel went right up the center of this ramp, and it bent the hell out of the mesh. I don't know if you can see it from there, but it's kind of the mesh is all bent kind of like in a cross pattern like that. And that was, you know, needless to say, I was pretty irritated after that happened. In all honesty, for what it's worth, I don't think it would have cost them a whole lot more to just weld a couple of extra pieces of steel channel in the center there to beef that center part up a little bit, because I imagine I'm probably not the only person that's using one of these trailers to haul a narrow front tractor. Granted, a lot of guys hauling farm tractors around are probably going with a deck over as opposed to a buggy hauler with a little bit of a lower profile, but like I said, for what it's worth, that tailgate should have been reinforced. I think it could be a little sturdier. So at some point down the road, I'm going to have just a local fabrication shop weld some extra pieces in there to beef it up a little bit. Now, it is possible to load a narrow front tractor on a trailer, you know, with individual ramps or with a single piece ramp like this that's not reinforced in the middle. All you do is just come up at a 45-degree angle and then turn your front wheel and follow the far ramp. But that gets kind of annoying having to do that over and over again, especially when you're unloading. So like I said, at some point I do plan to have one of the local fabricators just beef that center part up a little bit. Otherwise, that single piece tailgate really is well worth the money. It's just that one little issue I have with the center portion. Now, I know with a buggy hauler trailer like this, sometimes people get a little skeptical of the drive over style buggy fenders, the low profile fenders, but I can vouch for these. These are a lot sturdier than they look. These are made out of 1/4-inch thick diamond plate steel, and then they're also reinforced in the center with some steel pipe there. And like I said, they're definitely sturdier than they look. The very first thing I hauled with this trailer was that John Deere 60, and with the back wheels slid all the way out, they were just barely resting on those fenders. Any wider and this trailer wouldn't have worked for what we were doing. But the majority of the weight of that tractor was on top of those back fenders, and they didn't flinch at all. The welds held up really good, nothing cracked, nothing bent. It may have scuffed the powder coat a little bit, but if that's the worst thing, you know, the worst damage that that tractor did to those fenders, then I'm a happy camper. So like I said, don't fret. These are actually very sturdy for what they're worth. They're designed to take the weight of whatever you drive over top of them. So that was part of my reasoning for going with the extra wide deck as well. Now, the one complaint that I do have about the fenders is the quality of the welds is not that great in some spots. I don't know if this is something that happens in shipment. I don't know if maybe these are shipped without the fenders, or if the fenders are installed at a later date and welded on, but you can see a lot of the weld slag, and you can see where they actually burn through the plate in a couple spots. It's not the end of the world, but I feel like for what these trailers are worth, I could have gotten some better quality welds there. I mean, I'm confident that they're not going to break at all. These welds are not going to crack, but I mean, come on, that's just, you know, they could have done a better job than that. So again, I don't know if that was a result of them just kind of rushing putting these together to get them out the door or what, but you know, for a company like PJ, that's a pretty piss poor quality weld. So I know there's probably not a whole lot of people that are running one of these, you know, extra wide buggy hauler trailers out there, but for what I'm looking to do, I actually like the idea of the buggy hauler with your, you know, lower deck compared to a deck over. I feel like they're a little bit safer because they have a lower center of gravity, which is important, especially when hauling farm equipment or anything heavy, really. But like I said, this trailer is just fine for what I'm looking to do, and the only future upgrades that I can see right now are going to be the reinforced tailgate and then possibly a tongue-mounted toolbox. So that'll come in due time, but for right now, this trailer will work just fine for what I need. So hopefully this was a good, you know, this gives you a good idea of my reasoning behind purchasing a trailer like this, and you can understand why I went with something like this as opposed to a deck over or, you know, a slightly more commercial or industrial grade trailer. And I can't say that I see a whole lot of these buggy haulers out there on the road. I know a handful of people that are using them, but I think most people just opt to go for a deck over. But hopefully this can convince some people otherwise, and that's really all there is to it. You'll see this trailer in plenty of future videos. I know this trailer will last me a very, very long time, and it's just right for what I need. You know, it's heavy enough to haul a big farm tractor, or at least antique tractor, I should say, but it's still light and small enough that I can haul 1 or 2 garden tractors on it, and it's not too obnoxiously big. So, like I said, this will work just fine for what I need, and I gotta say, it looks pretty darn good behind my F-250 Super Duty there. I feel like it's just the right amount of trailer for that truck. I mean, that 7.3 could pull trailers much bigger than that, but for what I'm looking to do, this will work just fine. So if you guys have any questions about the trailer, or you're looking, you're in the market for one, looking for some input, feel free to leave a comment or shoot me an email. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have. And you'll be seeing this trailer in many future videos, like I said, so I look forward to that. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.